Today, we're going to take one of the biggest lessons from Sun Tzu's The Art of War and connect it to the absolutely tragic final stand of a legendary hero. It's a story that really pits cold, hard strategy against heroic pride, and it forces an impossible choice.
So let me start with a question that gets right to the heart of what we're talking about today. Imagine you're backed into a corner. Defeat looks almost certain. What do you do? Do you go down fighting in a blaze of glory, or do you live to fight another day?
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll dive into Sun Tzu's 6 methods for using your troops. Then, we'll see how those rules played out in the final dramatic battle of the hegemon king, Xiang Yu. From there, we'll try to unpack the famous enigma of his choice at the Wu River. And finally, we'll see what this ancient wisdom has to teach us today.
Now, to really understand the tragedy of our story, we first have to understand the rules of the game. And for that, we've got to turn to the master strategist himself, Sun Tzu, and his brilliant framework for acting based on your actual strength.
So here's the core idea. Sun Tzu was, he was not a fan of just charging in blindly. He believed that every single military decision had to be based on a cold, hard calculation of the forces involved. He gave us this super clear framework so you know exactly when to fight and, maybe more importantly, when not to.
And this just lays out the logic so perfectly. If you have 10 times their numbers, you surround them. 5 times, you can attack head-on. But what if you're weaker? Then you evade. And if you're weaker in every single way, you avoid a fight altogether. It's like a ladder of strategic responses, and it's all based on a rational look at the situation.
You know, what's really interesting is that there's this old debate over the 3rd and 4th rules. The modern reading says you use a 2-to-1 advantage to fight directly. Makes sense. But the traditional text suggests using that same advantage to divide the enemy first. It's a small difference, but it's fascinating. One way focuses on brute force, the other on clever strategy.
And this brings us to a really powerful warning from Sun Tzu. He's basically saying that if you're the smaller force and you stubbornly insist on a direct fight anyway, your fate is sealed. You are going to be captured. This one sentence, right here, sets the stage for the whole tragedy we're about to explore.
Okay, so let's jump into our case study and see how this very principle played out in real life. We are talking about Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Chu, a man whose final hours are truly the stuff of legend.
Okay, so picture this. The year is 202 BCE. The place is Gaixia. On one side, you've got Xiang Yu with maybe 100,000 soldiers. And on the other, Liu Bang's Han forces with over 600,000. That is a 6-to-1 disadvantage. According to Sun Tzu's rules, Xiang Yu's only logical moves were to run or hide.
But Xiang Yu, he doesn't retreat. He fights. After his army's morale is just completely shattered by some clever psychological warfare, he makes a desperate breakout with just 800 of his best horsemen. The Han army is right on his tail. By the time he crosses the Huai River, only 100 men are left. Then he gets lost, is tricked by a farmer, and is finally cornered with his last 28 loyal followers, facing thousands. And here, facing the end, Xiang Yu says something amazing. He tells his men that his defeat isn't because he's a bad warrior, but because heaven itself has decided he must fall. He sees it all as fate, not a failure in his own strategy.
In his final moments, a glimmer of hope appears. He gets to the Wu River, and a local boatman offers him a ride to safety, back to his homeland of Jiangdong. He tells him, hey, you've still got land, you've still got people, you can start over, be a king again. This is literally Sun Tzu's 6th rule in action, a chance to avoid the enemy and survive.
But Xiang Yu says no. He looks at that boat, and all he can think about are the 8,000 men from Jiangdong who crossed that very river with him to build an empire. Not a single one of them is going back. The shame, he says, would be too much to bear, even if their families never said a word. His honor, his pride, it just outweighed any instinct for survival.
And that choice, to die a hero rather than live with the shame of retreat, has echoed through history. Seriously, for over 2,000 years, poets, politicians, and historians have all argued about whether he made the right call.
This chart just shows the divide so well. The poet Du Mu was pragmatic. He was like, hey, winning and losing is part of war. A real man swallows his pride to fight again. The statesman Wang Anshi was a bit more cynical, arguing Xiang Yu's cause was lost anyway, and his people wouldn't have backed him. But then you have the poet Li Qingzhao, and she saw it totally differently. For her, His choice was the ultimate act of heroism, a noble death for a great warrior.
But when we look at all of this through the cold, rational lens of Sun Tzu, the conclusion is crystal clear. Xiang Yu, for all his skill on the battlefield and his heroic spirit, became the perfect example of that warning. His pride and his stubborn refusal to retreat when he was the weaker force led him straight to his own destruction.
So why does a 2,000-year-old story matter to us today? Well, let's bring this lesson into the 21st century and see how this strategic wisdom actually applies to our lives.
I love this quote from the statesman Li Ruhuan. He says that the principles of Sun Tzu aren't just for war. They're a guide for navigating competition in any part of life. The 6 methods are really a universal framework for making smart decisions.
I mean, just think about it. Whether you're launching a business, playing sports, trying to get ahead in your career, or even just working on a personal project, you are constantly sizing up your strengths against your challenges. Knowing when to push hard, when to look for help, and when to cut your losses and try a different approach is absolutely critical.
And that really brings us to the core lesson here. Sun Tzu teaches us to act based on an honest assessment of reality, not on emotion or ego. Xiang Yu was a tremendous hero, but his heroic pride blinded him to the strategic need to retreat. He chose an honorable death over a tactical withdrawal that could have led to a future victory.
So that leaves us with a final question to think about. In our own lives, when we're facing our own impossible odds, how do we balance that heroic desire to fight to the bitter end with the wisdom to know when it's time to step back, regroup, and live to fight another day?